Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump changing course on the release of the Epstein files and the administration touting affordability in a push before next year's midterm elections. The Trump administration has given a week's notice to the Maduro regime before the U.S. designates the Cartel of the Suns as a foreign terrorist organization. The designation would expand the president's powers to take action against the regime. Does the U.S. have to consider asylum claims from people waiting to cross the southern border? The Supreme Court says they'll hear a case. People looking for holiday seasonal hiring should be on the lookout for ghost jobs. Find out why applying for quality over quantity may be better for finding a job. A senior Japanese official is in Beijing working to ease escalating tensions between the two countries. It comes after Japan's prime minister promised to protect Taiwan if invaded by China, to which a Chinese official responded with a startling threat. Emirates orders new Boeing 777s. The deal makes the carrier Boeing's largest customer for the aircraft.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. President Trump changing course on his previous opposition to a bill ordering the release of the Epstein files, and the president highlighting his economic agenda in a push for affordability before the midterm elections. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the White House. Mari, good afternoon. What's President Trump's latest take on the Epstein files?
Don, good afternoon. Yes, today President Trump is changing course on the release of the Epstein files. He's now calling on House Republicans to vote for a bill that would essentially compel the Department of Justice to release all files pertaining to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The president also just moments ago in the Oval said that he wants to sign that bill if it gets to his desk after passing both the House and the Senate. And in a Truth Social post on Sunday, President Trump writes that Republicans should vote to release the files because, quote, they have nothing to hide, saying it's time to move on from what he calls a Democrat hoax perpetrated to deflect from what he calls the great success of the Republican Party. He also adds, quote, let's start talking about the Republican Party's record-setting achievements and not fall into the Epstein trap. Take a look at his remarks in the Oval today.
We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats. You look at this Reid Hoffman, you look at Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, they went to his island all the time, and many others, they're all Democrats. All I want for people to recognize a great job that I've done on pricing, on affordability, because we brought prices way down. But what I just don't want Epstein to do is detract from the great success of the Republican Party, including the fact that the Democrats are totally blamed for the shutdown. You know, they cost our country hundreds of billions of dollars with that.
And as Democrats ascribe their recent off-year election wins in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia as due to their messaging on affordability, President Trump dismisses Democrats' recent focus on affordability, calling it a, quote, hollow catchphrase instead of serious policy. He adds that he's been relentlessly focused on the economy and that he's undoing damage from the previous administration. That includes today, President Trump also touts what he calls hundreds of billions of dollars coming into the country in tariff revenue, announcing that he'll likely be issuing tariff dividend checks sometime in the middle of 2026. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. An update on the case against former FBI Director James Comey. A federal judge has ordered the Justice Department to turn over documents from the grand jury indictment. In his ruling, Judge William Fitzpatrick says the department engaged in a disturbing pattern of investigative missteps when it secured an indictment against the former FBI chief. He says the so-called missteps could potentially undermine the integrity of the grand jury proceeding, and he's asked the DOJ to provide all grand jury documents to Comey's defense team. Comey is also challenging the case against him by claiming Lindsay Halligan, the prosecutor who brought those indictments against him, was not properly appointed. A hearing regarding whether to dismiss the case is scheduled for Wednesday. NTD has reached out to the Justice Department for a response. The Trump administration has announced it will designate the Maduro-led Cartel of the Suns as a foreign terrorist organization. The move comes as President Trump evaluates his military options against the regime. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has more on the story.
Peace, peace, peace. Imagine us people. Mira, son jodedores, joder.
Images over the weekend of a smiling Nicolás Maduro singing John Lennon's Imagine and asking for peace have not dissuaded the Trump administration from confronting one of the region's deadliest dictatorship in its history.
We have a lot of training in that part of the world. We're reactivating our jungle school in Panama. We would be ready to act on whatever the president's SecWar needed.
According to Human Rights Watch, the security forces of the Maduro regime have murdered more than 8,000 civilians in the last 9 years for resisting authority. Maduro has also been accused in U.S. courts of being a narco-terrorist and of leading the Cartel of the Suns. And over the weekend, the State Department announced that on November 24th, the United States will designate the Cartel of the Suns as a foreign terrorist organization.
Does that mean that the U.S. government can target Maduro's assets or infrastructure inside Venezuela?
It allows us to do that, but we haven't said we're going to do that. And we may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk.
More than a third of Venezuela's population has fled the country since Maduro took power, and some 700,000 Venezuelans migrated to the United States.
We didn't leave Venezuela because we wanted to. We fled Maduro.
It's time for him to go. I don't care if he goes to prison, they do something to him, or he just goes away to anywhere else. But it's time for him and his government to go.
More than 80,000 Americans died last year due to illegal drugs. The Trump administration has made it a priority to stop the flow of drugs into the United States.
Designating these groups terrorist organizations is the right thing to do, especially the drug cartels. They've killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world. It's about time we had a strong president like President Trump come in and hold these people accountable.
The most advanced U.S. aircraft carrier group, alongside 8 other destroyers and F-35s, have been deployed to the South Caribbean Sea as part of Operation Southern Spear. Thus far, the U.S. military has conducted 20 strikes against cartels trafficking drugs in the region and killing over 80 narco-terrorists. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
War Secretary Pete Hegseth launched a campaign called Operation Southern Spear, targeting narco-terrorists in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. Joining us to discuss is Emmanuel Rican, a Venezuelan lawyer and writer and the CEO of Regional Renaissance Consulting. So, Emmanuel, thank you for staying with us here. Can you talk?
Hi, thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you talk to us about the scale of force relative to the stated mission here? Because the total U.S. personnel in Latin America is approximately 15,000. This is the largest in the region in decades, and with the largest aircraft carrier in the world. So can you talk to us about that? Why deploy so many troops?
Well, I think that the President Trump understands that there's need to be a regime change in Venezuela because Nicolás Maduro has turned the region into a mess. I mean, he's the biggest threat to the United States in every reason. I mean, he's trafficking drugs, he's harboring terrorist groups from the Middle East in Venezuela, and he's also exporting criminals to the United States. So Nicolás Maduro is trying right now to negotiate with the Trump administration, saying that he will give oil license and all the stuff. But really, President Trump have next to him Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and he understands quite well what is going on in Venezuela. And he knows that while Maduro stays in power, there's not going to be security for the United States.
So, Emmanuel, I understand you have a law background. So can I ask you this question then? Do U.S. strikes on suspected drug boats violate international law? Because some are questioning whether the killings at sea are considered extrajudicial executions.
Well, I mean, the Trump administration has designated these groups as terrorist foreign groups. Actually, yesterday, the Secretary of State designated Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist organization. So they are trafficking drugs to the United States. They are killing hundreds of thousands of people every year. It's more than the double of the people that they kill in all the Vietnam War. So, I mean, this is a big threat to the United States.
Okay, so can you address some of the reactions from countries so far? Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro mobilizing 200,000 troops and placed the country on maximum alert, right? Saying the U.S. actions are an act of aggression. The UK has reportedly suspended intelligence with the U.S. over concerns of the legality of the strike. So what are your reactions to that?
I mean, those numbers are inflated. I mean, there's no way that Nicolas Maduro has that amount of personnel training right now. I mean, what is happening in Venezuela is that the Maduro regime has established that all the mayors and generals in the military of Venezuela has become like drug lords. And that is not the same for all the people, I mean, all the soldiers in the forces. So while all the people in the military, in the high ranks, are getting rich with narco trafficking and gold mining and all the stuff, the people, I mean, the other soldiers are having a bad time, they don't have like money to eat and all those stuff. So really, Maduro doesn't have all the support. It has the support of criminal groups that are profiting from this catastrophe, but it's not going to last. And the people is not going to stand with Nicolas Maduro. I mean, 90% of the Venezuelans reject this regime, so he doesn't really have a support in the Venezuelan people.
So, Emmanuel, as we heard from the press conference earlier, reporters were asking about President Trump, about U.S. troops on the ground in Venezuela, and it appears that President Trump did not rule that out. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that the President Trump, I mean, yesterday they said that they were going to designate the Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist foreign group on November 24. I think that the President Trump has given an ultimatum to Maduro and his cronies and saying, you got 7 days to pack up and going out, or maybe we're going to get in. I mean, that's what I can understand about what President Trump is doing.
How much drugs really are coming into the U.S. from these regions?
I mean, from Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela is not the place where all the drugs are being like cropped. Venezuela is the place where they are distributing the drugs. So I will say that approximately, since report from the FBI of 2021, it's like between 20% or 25% of the drugs that are coming to the United States. I mean, all the drugs that are coming from Colombia and Bolivia and Peru are crossing through Venezuela and going up to the United States.
Okay, Emmanuel, final question. Could Operation Southern Spear play a role in deterring future threats against the United States?
100%. But I mean, as I was saying at first, I mean, I think that the United States has to defend their homeland and the national security. And for that to happen, they have to eliminate all the illegal and criminal groups that are destroying the United States. The Maduro regime is harboring terrorists from the Middle East, are sending criminals to the United States, and are sending a ton of drugs that are killing hundreds of thousands of people. So if the United States doesn't do anything about it, it's going to continue this enormous crisis in the region.
Well, okay, Emmanuel, really appreciate you speaking with us today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Does the U.S. have to hear asylum claims from people attempting to cross the U.S.-Mexico border? Federal law wording says that someone has to have arrived in the U.S. for consideration. The Supreme Court says they'll hear a case deciding if that extends to someone arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border without crossing over just yet. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
The Supreme Court announces that they'll decide whether federal law requires asylum claims to be heard from someone who arrives at the U.S.-Mexico border but doesn't cross into the U.S. The law says a person may apply for asylum stating any alien who is physically present in the United States or who arrives in the United States qualifies. While it's not normal procedure from 2016 to 2021, during an influx of immigration arrivals, the federal government had a policy to turn people away just before they crossed into the U.S., therefore not hearing their asylum claims. This is no longer practiced. However, the Trump administration wants legal clarification in case a similar situation happens again. Over the weekend, the Department of Homeland Security says 130 illegal immigrants were arrested in Charlotte, North Carolina. What the DHS is calling Operation Charlotte's Web got started on Saturday. DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin tells Newsmax that Charlotte has 1,400 illegal immigrants in its jails, but will not turn them over to ICE.
We're talking about serial child pedophiles, murderers, rapists, gang members, people who pose real public security threats.
North Carolina Governor Josh Stein posted a message to Customs and Border Protection in response to the federal operation. Stein expresses support for removing undocumented criminals. However, he criticizes the actions of the federal agents.
We've seen masked, heavily armed agents in paramilitary garb driving unmarked cars.
The DHS reported that during an operation in Charlotte on Sunday, a U.S. citizen drove a van at law enforcement, injuring an officer. The driver was arrested and firearms were found inside the van, according to the DHS. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Tensions are increasing between the U.S. and Venezuela. The Trump administration is designating a Venezuelan cartel allegedly run by the country's president, a foreign terrorist organization. Here are the details.
It's about protecting America from foreign terrorists.
The Department of State has announced it will designate the Venezuelan group known as the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the designation takes effect November 24th. The Trump administration alleges the organization is led by senior Venezuelan government figures, including President Nicolas Maduro, and involved in international cocaine smuggling. Maduro has denied these allegations. Rubio said Sunday the Cartel de los Soles is responsible for terrorist violence throughout the Western Hemisphere. The designation will expand federal authorities' ability to pursue the group. It makes it a federal crime for anyone in the U.S. to assist the cartel and allows federal officials to freeze any assets connected to it. Trump was asked yesterday if the U.S. government can target assets inside Venezuela.
It allows us to do that, but we haven't said we're going to do that. And we may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk.
The move comes after the Treasury Department earlier this year labeled the cartel a specially designated global terrorist. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent says Sunday's action further exposes the Maduro regime's facilitation of narco-terrorism. The announcement comes as U.S. forces continue a series of military strikes on vessels they say are involved in narcotics smuggling. This weekend, the military carried out its 21st such operation, bringing the total casualty count to 83 people. U.S. Southern Command said Secretary of War Pete Hegseth ordered Saturday's strike in the Eastern Pacific, which targeted a vessel linked to a designated terrorist organization. Southern Command said the boat was smuggling narcotics along a known trafficking route. The military said 3 people on board were killed. U.S. military activity against suspected drug traffickers has expanded across waters near Venezuela and Colombia. President Trump has come under criticism from both Democrats and Republicans for not seeking congressional approval for these strikes. He explained his decision yesterday.
I said, go to Congress and let them know we're not letting drugs come through Mexico. We're not letting them come through Venezuela. And let Congress know about it. We don't have to get their approval, but I think letting them know is good.
Senator Rand Paul and Congressman Thomas Massie, both Republicans, have described the strikes as an overreach of executive authority. Paul has described them as summary executions and extrajudicial killings. The Department of Justice has stated that military personnel involved in the strikes are not liable for prosecution.
The Supreme Court says it will review the mediating border policy from the first Trump administration that was canceled under former President Biden. The policy limited the amount of undocumented migrants processed at border ports of entry. The Biden administration instead put in place a process of favoring migrant processing. A memo shows administration officials asking efforts be made so migrants aren't turned away at ports of entry. Even though the policy, the Trump policy that is no longer in place, the case to rescind it is still being pushed by immigration advocacy organization Alto Lado. The Trump administration is challenging al otro lado because the case result does not restrict future immigration policy. Dozens of children have been saved as part of an FBI partnership called Operation Home for the Holidays. FBI Jacksonville announced that 122 children were located or recovered across Florida and 9 other states. They range from about 2 years old to 17 years old. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed the rescues on his X account as well. The FBI says some of these kids said they were experiencing various kinds of abuse and were exposed to other criminal activity. Operation Home for the Holidays was a U.S. Marshal-led initiative. Dozens are arrested in North Carolina. Agents took more than 80 illegal immigrants into custody in Charlotte on the first day of border enforcement operations. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the details, including a harrowing incident when someone allegedly launched a van at federal agents.
The Department of Homeland Security announced Saturday it was launching Operation Charlotte's Web, sending a surge of law enforcement resources to the city. DHS released a list of what it called the worst criminal illegal immigrants who it said had been released back onto North Carolina's streets because of sanctuary policies. Gregory Bavino, Commander-at-Large of the U.S. Border Patrol, documented several of the arrests on social media yesterday, which he said had risen to 81. Bavino quoted from the book Charlotte's Web when posting about the operation, writing, "Wherever the wind takes us, high, low, near, far, east, west, north, south, we take to the breeze, we go as we please." Bavino shared a video of arrests along with the post. Bavino also shared posts including pictures of some of the people the Trump administration had detained in Charlotte. One man who was arrested yesterday had an alleged history of repeated drunk driving incidents. Bavino wrote, "We arrested him, taking him off the streets of Charlotte, so he can't continue to ignore our laws and drive intoxicated on the same roads you and your loved ones are on." Another had charges for alleged hit and run and DUI. Yet another with a criminal history of arrests for aggravated assault, assault with a dangerous weapon, and DUI. In a separate incident, Homeland Security released a video of a U.S. citizen allegedly using a large van as a weapon, driving it at agents during an operation. Officials say he fled, prompting a dangerous high-speed chase through a densely populated area, and that he repeatedly tried to ram law enforcement vehicles before being boxed in. Agents say they found a firearm inside the vehicle after arresting the driver. DHS also pushed back on claims that a Hispanic man had been shot during another enforcement action. Assistant Homeland Security Secretary Tricia McLaughlin posted a video of the man on a stretcher and said he had suffered a panic attack, was taken to a hospital, and then attempted to escape by climbing into ceiling tiles before being apprehended. Republican Congressman Mark Harris welcomed the federal surge, speaking on News Nation.
I think people recognize it's welcome. It will help bring crime down. There had been a surge of 200% of murders in uptown Charlotte specifically.
Harris warned that the stakes are high in Charlotte.
These are serious criminal illegal aliens that they are here to deal with. This is not a time to play games.
On the Democrat side, Representative Alma Adams said Charlotte's immigrant community is a proud part of the Queen City and that she will not stand by and watch her constituents be intimidated or harassed, adding that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Border Patrol Commander Bavino responded, writing, "Representative Adams, perhaps you should learn the difference between an illegal alien and an immigrant." The granddaughter of Charlotte's Web author E.B. White criticized the use of the book's name in the operation, saying White believed in the rule of law, due process, and didn't condone what she called fear-mongering. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams stopped in Jerusalem over the weekend as part of an official visit to Israel. Israeli President Isaac Herzog today thanked Adams for his support during the war and commended his conduct as mayor. Here's Adams.
We want to clearly send the right message that 49% of New Yorkers made it clear that they don't embrace the philosophy of anti-Israel. 49% of New Yorkers. And so our city is more divided than it has ever been, but you must know that we still consider Israel as an ally and as a friend. And I'm here today as I leave office to state I would not be leaving my advocacy for Israel and for the Jewish people all over the globe.
The outgoing mayor was shown the tunnels underneath the Western Wall where archaeological digs are taking place. Adams called off his bid for re-election in September with his approval rating at a record low. The race was won by self-declared Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani, who was vocal about his support in Palestinians in the Gaza conflict. A possible thaw in a recent feud. President Trump yesterday said he plans to meet with New York City's mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani. Trump says the pair will work something out.
The mayor of New York, I will say, would like to meet with us and we'll work something out. But he would like to come to Washington and meet, and we'll work something out. We want to see everything work out well for New York.
Trump has taken aim at Mamdani for months, calling him a communist. Trump predicted New York would be ruined if the Democratic Socialist was elected. He also threatened to pull federal money from the city over Mamdani's policies. In his election night victory speech, Mamdani said he wanted New York to show the country how to defeat the president. But the day after, the incoming mayor also said he was willing to work with anyone, including the president, if it could help New Yorkers. And Trump defended conservative commentator Tucker Carlson yesterday over his recent interview with right-wing activist Nick Fuentes.
We've had some great interviews with Tucker Carlson, but you can't tell him who to interview. I mean, if he wants to interview Nick Fuentes, I don't know much about him, but if he wants to do it, get the word out. Let him, people have to decide. Ultimately, people have to decide.
Fuentes appeared to appreciate Trump's sentiment, posting, "Thank you, Mr. President," along with video of his interaction with reporters. Carlson had a sit-down on his podcast last month with Fuentes that touched off a very controversy among conservatives. Fuentes has been accused of making anti-Semitic statements. It's not the first time Trump has been asked about him. 3 years ago, he came to a dinner at Mar-a-Lago along with the rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. Trump at the time said he had not previously met Fuentes and knew nothing about him and didn't know he was coming with Ye. Thanksgiving is in 10 days and travelers already have a reason to be thankful. The FAA this morning ended its flight reduction order, allowing normal air traffic to resume. Here's more.
I think we're going to have a smooth, hopefully, Thanksgiving travel season.
Airlines are resuming their normal schedules in the U.S. today. The FAA says it's lifting flight restrictions that affected 40 major airports during the government shutdown. A joint statement from that agency and the Transportation Secretary cites, quote, safety trends and the steady decline of staffing trigger events in air traffic control facilities.
It does appear that air traffic controllers are working. The call-outs are minimal, and they're all getting bonuses now if they came to work. So I think the morale there is up, as well as the TSA.
Union leaders say it was hard for air traffic controllers to work full-time without pay during the shutdown.
The stresses, the pressure, the fatigue is setting in. Air traffic controllers are texting, "I don't even have enough money to put gas in my car to come to work."
The news might be a relief for people flying over Thanksgiving weekend. That's the busiest air travel period of the year, according to TSA data. Experts say passengers should still check airline apps for delays or cancellations, but for more typical reasons.
I think the things we should be looking out for are weather-related incidents that could kind of throw the system out of whack or outages. But overall, I think things are looking good.
The Dubai Air Show opened today with national airline Emirates ordering 65 Boeing 777 aircraft. The purchase comes as the carrier looks to expand its fleet amid record earnings and constant demand for flights. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the deal.
Emirates is looking to expand with 65 new Boeing jets. The announcement brings the carrier's total order to 270 new 777-9s, making it Boeing's largest customer for the aircraft.
It's a long-term commitment that supports hundreds of thousands of high-value manufacturing jobs, and it reinforces our 40-year partnership with Boeing and GE.
The airline valued its most recent deal with Boeing and GE engines at $38 billion. Head of Dubai Airports Paul Griffith expects more purchases from other carriers during the show.
It will be interesting to see how many airlines announce deals today and throughout the week. We're expecting a record order book for Dubai Air Show, and I'm sure it will not be a disappointing week.
Emirates earned annual profits of $5.2 billion in the last fiscal year. Passenger numbers remain record-breaking at Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest for international travel. The airline made a $52 billion purchase of Boeing aircraft at the 2023 edition of the airshow. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
President Trump's Gaza proposal faces a critical test today in the United Nations. The Security Council is scheduled to vote on a U.S.-backed resolution aimed at turning Gaza's fragile ceasefire into a longer-term peace plan. The vote comes as violence still periodically flares between Israel and Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected parts of the plan, specifically language pointing toward a future Palestinian state, while Hamas has also warned against the proposal. The draft needs 9 votes to pass, but China or Russia could veto it. The U.S. plan would launch a temporary board of peace chaired by President Trump. It would also deploy an international stabilization force to eventually replace Israeli troops in Gaza. Several Arab nations publicly supported the proposal, but Russia has introduced a competing resolution with stronger statehood language. New footage shows a U.S.-led command center in southern Israel overseeing President Trump's plan to end the Gaza war. The Civil Military Coordination Center, or CMCC, is staffed by soldiers and civilians from the U.S., Israel, and several other countries. Britain, Germany, France, Canada, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates are among the nations also present. The center started operating last month after a ceasefire came into effect. The CMCC is tasked with monitoring the ceasefire, as well as helping to increase the delivery of aid into Gaza. The German government said it's resuming exports of military equipment to Israel. Germany is the second largest exporter of arms to Israel after the United States announced a suspension of some arms exports to Israel in August amid popular pressure over the war. The decision affected weapons and systems that could be used in Gaza, but not others deemed necessary for Israel to defend itself from external attacks. A spokesperson said the restrictions will be lifted from November 24th. A Chinese man from the San Francisco Bay Area was sentenced today to 46 months in federal prison for stealing trade secrets technologies used to detect and track missiles. The technologies were developed by the United States, and the man, Cheng Guang, was ordered to pay $77,000 in restitution and fined an additional $100,000. Gong stole more than 3,600 files from a Southern California company where he worked as an engineer in 2023. Law enforcement also found that this was not an isolated incident and that Gong had a long pattern of stealing technology from U.S. companies to benefit the Chinese military. Gong had been recruited by China's communist regime in 2016 to collect and pass on information in exchange for financial incentives. Japan moved today to damp down an escalating dispute with China over Taiwan. The dispute has prompted Beijing to urge civilians and citizens to halt travel to its East Asian neighbor. Here are the details.
The dispute erupted after Japan's newly elected Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, openly raised the possibility of a Japanese military response to a Chinese attack on Taiwan, a topic earlier administrations steered clear of to avoid provoking Beijing. Senior Japanese diplomat Masaki Kanai arrived in China on Monday to meet his counterpart Liu Jin-song in an attempt to soothe the tensions, according to Japanese media. Kanai is expected to stress that Takaichi's remarks do not mark a shift in Japan's security policy and urge China to avoid further damaging ties. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara on Monday said China's travel warning is, quote, incompatible with the broad direction of promoting a strategic, mutually beneficial relationship confirmed by the leaders. Tourism-linked Japanese shares tumbled as the diplomatic row deepened. Isetan Mitsukoshi, a department store operator with substantial ties to Chinese visitors, sank 10.7% and is poised for its biggest drop in more than a year. Tokyo Disneyland operator Oriental Land lost 5.9%, and Japan Airlines shed 4.4%. Chinese companies with exposure to the Japanese market also suffered, with shares of software maker Linkage falling 3%. Beijing's travel boycott of Japan could result in an economic loss of about $14 billion annually, reducing the nation's real GDP by 0.36%, according to Nomura Research Institute's chief economist.
President Trump defended the H-1B visa program, saying there isn't enough domestic talent to fill available jobs. Joining us to discuss is Grant Newsroom, a retired U.S. Marine colonel and former U.S. diplomat. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy. And we also have Santiago Vidal Calvo, a policy analyst at Manhattan Institute. So good afternoon to you both. Colonel, if I may, I'll start with you today. In your view, does the U.S. need the H-1B visa programs to stay competitive on the global stage, especially against China?
Well, I think it does. You always want the best people that you can get. And the concern that I've got principally is that these sorts of programs, over some time, they become something of a racket where their original intentions and objectives are lost. And that's what I think is what's happened with the H-1B program. But in theory, it's a good one. I think the way it's turned out is not so good, and it does need some fixing.
So, Santiago, let me go to you now. What are your thoughts on this program? Do we need it?
Hey, well, thank you for the invitation. I actually do agree also that we need the H-1B program. It's a program that actually brings the best and brightest around the world, or that was the intention. And I do believe that the program needs some fixes and it needs some improvements. But in the big scheme of things, the U.S. needs this international talent to keep up with production of talent around the world. China outspeeds the United States in production of STEM graduates by 3 or 4 times of what we're currently producing. And if we can pitch as a soft technique around the world to bring this talent to the United States and use it here for our advantage, I think that's a benefit.
Well, security concerns, if we're always relying on foreign talent, domestically.
No, I'm sorry, got cut off. Was that for me?
Right. Colonel.
Okay, thank you. Didn't hear that. Okay. Well, of course, there's a national security issue all the time to all of this. And one thing I've noticed, I also used to work for Motorola, if anyone remembers that company, and also a big investment bank. I remember the HR people would often tell you that they could hire people so much cheaply overseas, and that's what they were all in for. And with these programs, and I would have to say HR in general, there's often a sense that that national security is somebody else's problem. So I'm not sure that it gets the attention it deserves here, but it is obviously a concern, and that's why the program needs to be very carefully monitored to ensure that you don't have these kind of national security issues. And the original intention of the program is a good one. But the way that it's worked out now, I'm just not convinced that it is. And any time that you hear that there's a lottery involved in choosing people, and there's obvious evidence of fraud as well in some of the qualifications of some of the people, maybe a lot of them from certain places, that the whole thing needs to be revamped pretty seriously.
So, Santiago, I want to follow up on your earlier point. And I want to ask, to what extent does the U.S. depend on foreign talent to sustain its different sectors right now?
Well, the H-1B visa program, it's just a very small fraction of the labor market. You're talking about 700,000 people out of more than 100 million people market in the United States. And true, for some sectors, it is very important, like, for example, tech. But it is also true that what we're bringing here is capacitated skills that around the world are tailored for the needs of the United States. And if we can bring those immigrants here, then that is a net benefit for the United States, both fiscally, because the average H-1B migrant, depending on the age, can produce up to a net benefit to the fiscal burden of the United States of $800,000. And that is, research from the Manhattan Institute, where I work at, with Daniel DiMartino, who is one of our fellows. However, I also see that many parts, like, the colonel is saying, many parts of this immigration program need to be revamped with what we previously had. Like, for example, the United States previously had restrictions for Communist Party affiliates or totalitarian regime affiliates, and we still have those for immigrant visas, like green cards. However, we remove many of them for non-immigrant visas, like the H-1B visa program. We can 100% deny entrance to the United States dependent on communist affiliation. That is something that goes against our national interests. And regardless of the skills, you don't want people that are going to go against the national interests of the United States.
So, Colonel, maybe you can address some of your earlier concerns that you brought up. How do we have a program where we can have foreign talent come into the country, but not have, at the same time, national security concerns, not have IP theft as well?
Well, there's always going to be that theft and that sort of risk. And that's actually not one of the main things as I see it, but rather it's that a program that is intended to be carefully applied to get specific people to do some very narrow things has been expanded apparently to sort of, some might fairly argue, displace American workers who cost too much. And when you have sort of these third-party groups that can get a lot of the H-1B visas and then dole them out, well, it's not fair, to put it mildly. But there is that concern that it's American workers who aren't getting looked after. I think it is very much a real one. And I remember hearing this in the past, in the 80s. Remember, we were told that Americans won't work. And there's going to be the Japanese who are going to take us over. Well, there's plenty of Americans, with the skills to do these things. And sometimes you need training. We'll bring in a few trainers, but it should not be sort of a scheme to bring in large numbers of people. As I see it, there was something like 180,000 Americans who sort of got the max score on the SATs just recently. And that's a lot of people. So we do have the resources, and where we need extra people, then bring them in. But it has to be done carefully. Not the way that it's been done now, where it almost reminds you of, say, when you hear that a sporting event, all the tickets are sold, and then somehow you can buy them somewhere because somebody has managed to get their hands on a lot of them. It does need to be relooked.
Okay, so Santiago, do you see any solutions? Perhaps reform is needed for this program so that we don't have the issues, the abuse as well associated with H-1B?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the H-1B visa program is not a cheap program by any means. You're talking about median salaries of $120,000 a year. These are not cheap labor that you're trying to import from somewhere else. And the median just means that 50% of those H-1Bs are actually above that 120,000. So it's not cheap labor by all means, especially when it costs the employer before the $100,000 fee hike almost $15,000 to $20,000 to hire an H-1B employee. Now it costs them $120,000 to hire an H-1B employee. So we're talking about a big investment that we're doing into the country. Some things that you can do to revamp this program is choose some prevailing wage. You grab the salaries that are the highest by profession and by age, and you essentially, you give them better chances of winning a lottery. For example, the United States would benefit from having a 23-year-old engineer or IT specialist that comes to this country with valuable skills before having the same exact profession, but 40 or 50 years old. Because if you're grabbing younger, that means those people are going to pay more in taxes. And H-1B employees pay around $85 billion in taxes to the United States. So we're talking a big portion of the population, a big payment going from a very, very small portion of the population. And we can even revamp this program to be even more beneficial for the United States.
Okay, Colonel, maybe just one more response from you, and then, pardon me, and then one more from Santiago. So I wanted to ask you, Colonel, what ultimately does America's superpower status depend on?
Depends on the things that make us successful, and that's consensual government, the freedoms we take for granted, free markets, and a sort of a world that plays by those rules as well. But it does not sort of require us, as I say, to at all cost forget about who the Americans are. And this system ultimately needs to be, like every system, needs to look after American workers. And that's American workers from all over the place. And it needs to be carefully done, carefully handled. And I think American workers have gotten lost in a lot of this. The idea is that, well, you can, and I've seen this happen, you can get somebody cheaper, you bring them in. And I hear that, I've heard that all the time in the companies that I've worked for. But say American workers tend to get lost in all of the discussion about this. And they need to be looked after first. National security needs to be an issue as well. So, it's a system that does need to be fixed, and I think fixed pretty quickly.
Okay, Santiago, just final thoughts here. Same question to you. What would you attribute to the United States' top spot in the global stage?
Well, I think it's our ability to influence the world with the things we do. I think it's to keep our ranking as a primary effective builder and creator of all the things that made America great. And for example, 57% of STEM PhDs are responsible for a big portion of the education sector in the STEM. Most patents are built by immigrants. Those things are very beneficial. Companies like Tesla would have never existed if Elon Musk, an H-1B recipient, would have not come here to the United States and created thousands of jobs more for Americans. I think what we need to see here is the value that each visa has. And there is research to show that each H-1B visa increments the job market. I would actually say that most American workers benefit from having H-1B visas because H-1B visas pay $27 billion in Social Security and Medicare here in the United States. Those are things that, sure, a very small portion of a population loses, but are they necessarily losing because H-1B visas are working as replacement? There is hundreds of thousands of jobs open in the tech market, more than the H-1B visas that come each year. I think it's a matter of competition. It's a matter of, are we choosing the best people for the job? And if those best people can come from abroad and help America in the process keep its status as a world-leading economy and as a world-leading producer of technologies, I think that's a net benefit for the United States.
Well, all right, let's leave the conversation here for today. Thank you both, Santiago, Colonel Newsham. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
President Trump is now holding a meeting of the FIFA World Cup 2026 task force at the White House right now. Let's take a look.
Fantastic job, as well as Representative Darren LaHood. Thank you all very much. Hi, Darren. This past summer, the United States hosted the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup, and it was great. I actually went to a match, and it was amazing. That was a big success, too, wasn't it? It was sort of like a preview of what's to come. And now we're getting ready for an even bigger event next year as we host the official 2026 FIFA World Cup. That's the big one. The World Cup tournament. This will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, even for our country, because frankly, this goes to countries, everybody wants it. I guess it's going all over the world. Do you know who's getting it the next time around? Who's getting it? Has that been selected?
The next one will be Morocco, Spain, and Portugal.
That's good.
With 3 matches at the beginning in South America, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. And the one after will be Saudi Arabia in 2034.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Well, we have the king coming, Crown Prince is coming tomorrow. This will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to showcase the greatness of America and world-class athletic competition as we celebrate our nation's 250th year. The World Cup will also be an incredibly significant economic opportunity for countless American workers and businesses. It's expected to drive more than $30 billion, Johnny. I don't know about that. That sounds like a lot of money.
No, that's true.
Are you sure?
100%.
How much does the country get out of that?
30 billion.
20%. No, do we get like a percentage of the gross or anything?
That's for negotiation.
That's right. Yeah. And it's going to create nearly 200,000 jobs for America. Since the creation of the White House FIFA Task Force earlier this year, Secretary Rubio's team at the State Department has worked tirelessly with the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that soccer fans from all around the world are properly vetted and able to come to the United States next summer easily. Before I took office, it would often take a year to get a travel visa, but because of the administration's hard work, now in more than 80% of the world, think of that, the wait time for a visa is 60 days or less. For those who intend to join us for the World Cup, I strongly encourage you to apply right away. And I want to thank FIFA Task Force and Secretary Rubio for the great job. Marco's doing a fantastic job in many ways, too. So I want to just thank you all for a great job. Marco, you're doing a great job. Beyond even this, we're also creating what we're calling the FIFA Prioritized Appointment Scheduling System. That's a hard one for most people to remember, but it's there nevertheless. And this will allow World Cup ticket holders with long wait times to opt with FIFA for a prioritized interview. And I've directed my administration to do everything within the power to make the 2026 World Cup an unprecedented success. I think it's going to be the greatest. And we are setting records on ticket sales. Nobody's ever really, and FIFA's never, you know, if you look at the numbers, nobody's ever seen anything like the kind of numbers we're doing.
President Trump says Republicans are working on legislation that will impose sanctions on any country doing business with Russia.
The Republicans are putting in legislation that very tough. It's sanctioning, et cetera, on any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned. We may add Iran to the formula, yeah.
The Kremlin said today it hopes another meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump can take place soon. It says both sides need to complete what it calls the necessary preparation. Russia says both sides agree that a summit requires deep preparation to be productive. Putin and Trump last met in August at a summit in Alaska focused on possible steps toward ending the war in Ukraine. Plans for a follow-up summit in Budapest were announced last month. President Trump later canceled it, saying the timing didn't feel right. An explosion damaged a Polish railway track en route to Ukraine over the weekend. Prime Minister Donald Tusk today called the blast an unprecedented act of sabotage. He said he would catch those responsible for an incident he said could have ended in tragedy. The blast follows a wave of arson, sabotage, and cyber attacks that has hit Poland and other European countries since the start of the war in Ukraine. Warsaw has, in the past, held Russia responsible, saying Poland has become one of Moscow's biggest targets due to its role as a hub for aid to Kyiv. Russia has repeatedly denied being responsible for acts of sabotage. Ukrainian President Zelensky is in France today, signing a major weapons deal. Ukraine is said to receive 100 French fighter jets, among other things, and Russia says it still hopes for a presidential meeting with the U.S. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
France and Ukraine on Monday agreeing on a major weapons deal. Paris is set to supply Kiev with 100 fighter jets. Besides the 100 jets, Ukraine is also set to receive French radars and 8 air defense systems, each with 6 launching systems. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says each one of those launching systems means that more Ukrainian lives will be saved. Here is Zelensky commenting on the deal while in Paris on Monday.
We're setting a direction. We will together increase the industrial and technological potential of Ukraine and France. This means not only defense, this is literally the strength in life.
Monday marks Zelensky's 9th visit to Paris since Russia's invasion over 3 years ago. His talks were meant to strengthen Ukraine's defense as the country enters another winter under Russian bombardment of its energy infrastructure. French President Emmanuel Macron commented on the ongoing fighting while meeting with Zelensky on Monday.
In the face of this persistence by Russia, these unacceptable attacks against civilians and on critical energy infrastructure, we remain determined and strong-willed for peace.
The Kremlin didn't respond to Macron's statements. Neither did it comment on Monday's weapons deal between Ukraine and France. But a spokesman says that Russia still hopes for a presidential meeting with the US once the preparation is done to guarantee a productive summit.
We are all interested in these conditions occurring sooner rather than later. As soon as this preparation is completed and the conditions are in place, we hope it will take place.
President Trump, meanwhile, says that Republicans in Congress are planning to impose new sanctions on numerous countries.
On any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned.
Senator Lindsey Graham confirmed on Monday, saying the legislation allows President Trump to impose secondary sanctions and tariffs on countries who continue to buy cheap Russian oil and gas, propping up Putin's war machine. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
A World War II veteran has celebrated his 101st birthday after becoming a published songwriter. His work is a collaboration with a Nashville-based nonprofit that helps veterans through the arts. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the tune.
One day before his 101st birthday, If Freedom Was Free was released by Big Machine label group. The song is the work of World War II veteran Irving Locker. Locker details the daily struggles he and other service members faced. No toilets, no sinks, no showers, and living in a foxhole.
These are the things that come out. So with the song or with this, I've been doing this now since the war. Talking about this and trying to educate people as to what the hell it was.
Locker teamed up with nonprofit Creative Vets. The Nashville-based organization works with veterans in their artistic pursuits. Locker explains the meaning behind his work.
It means the truth. So many men died, and so many men lost their legs and their arms, and they're still in hospitals. It's 81 years ago, and they're still tied up and crippled up because they had to fight. So freedom is not free.
Locker landed at Utah Beach on D-Day. He says he became more spiritual as the war raged on.
I learned to be very honest with you, I was never conscious of God until the war. But I came so close to dying that I learned to thank God and use the simple phrase, but for the grace of God go I.
Locker worked with Texas singer-songwriter Bart Crow and duo Johnny and Heidi Bulford, who also sing on the track. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Thank you.